Many years ago, I experienced an event that still haunts me to this day. I was a freshman at a small college in the Midwest, majoring in theater. One night, feeling a bit mischievous, I decided to put my acting skills to use. I transformed myself into a ghostly figure, complete with a white dress and pale makeup. With some props to enhance the effect, I set out for a little prank. It was around 11 p.m., and the streets were deserted except for a few dedicated taxi drivers. I chose a quiet, dimly lit street and began flagging down cabs with slow, deliberate motions. Several taxis pulled over, only to speed off as soon as they got a good look at me. I was thrilled. My prank was working perfectly. Finally, one brave taxi stopped and the driver rolled down his window. Without hesitation, I climbed in. As the car started moving, the driver asked, "Where to?" "Take me to Westwood Cemetery," I said in a low, eerie voice. Westwood Cemetery was about 10 miles outside of town, nestled in a forested area. The driver shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't go to cemeteries at night," he muttered. "Too creepy." "Then take me to the Devil's Bridge on the east side," I suggested. Devil's Bridge had a notorious reputation. It was known for strange accidents and suicides, earning it a sinister nickname. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his face pale. "No way, that place is bad news, especially at night." "All right, then take me home to Whispering Pines Cemetery in the south," I said, trying to maintain my spooky demeanor. The driver was visibly sweating now. He hesitated, then said, "I can't take you there either. How about you find another cab?" Sensing his fear, I decided to push my luck. "What's the date today?" I asked in a low, haunting tone. "April 27th, he replied nervously. "Why?" "My birthday is in 2 weeks. I'm looking for a replacement. I think you'll do nicely. Be ready on May 11th. With that, I handed him a fake bill from a prop set and touched the back of his neck with an ice-cold hand. He flinched and, in a panic, sped off as soon as I got out. Laughing, I watched the taillights disappear into the night, feeling triumphant. A week passed, and I had almost forgotten about my prank. One night, I fell into a deep sleep and had a vivid dream. I was sitting in a taxi, the same one from my prank. The driver was focused on the road, his face illuminated by the dashboard lights. Everything felt strangely familiar. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice shaky. "To Westwood Cemetery," the driver replied without turning his head. "You said you wanted to go there." I felt a chill run down my spine. "No, stop the car. I want to get out." The taxi continued its journey, ignoring my pleas. Panic set in as we drove further away from the city. "Please, let me out," I begged, but the driver remained silent. Desperation took over, and I grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. I tried dialing emergency services, but the call wouldn't go through. I was trapped. The driver finally spoke, his voice eerily familiar. "You think this is a joke? You think it's funny to scare people?" I froze. "Who are you? What do you want?" The driver chuckled darkly. "I'm the one you scared. Because of your prank, I lost control and crashed. I died that night, and now it's your turn to pay." I turned to look at him, and his face began to change. It became distorted, bloody, and unrecognizable. I screamed, jolting awake in my bed, drenched in sweat. Just as I started to calm down, there was a knock on my door. My heart pounded as I approached it, hesitant to open. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice trembling. "It's me, the taxi driver," came the chilling reply. "You wanted to go to Westwood Cemetery, remember? I'm here to take you." Nestled in the secluded woods of Ashwood, the abandoned manor stood as a relic of forgotten times, shrouded in mystery and dread. The village children, warned by their elders, never dared to approach it, but for Clara, Sam, and Lily, the lure of the unknown was irresistible. One summer evening, the trio decided to explore the manor, driven by a mixture of curiosity and a desire to prove their bravery. They armed themselves with flashlights and wore thick jackets, more as a shield against their growing fear than the evening chill. As they approached Ashwood Manor, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out from the house itself. Two ancient oak trees flanked the entrance, their gnarled branches forming a twisted archway that led to the front door. The villagers whispered that these trees were cursed, and anyone who slept beneath them would dream of a woman with hollow eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth, whispering secrets that would drive them mad. Ignoring the ominous atmosphere, Clara, Sam, and Lily stood before the manor's massive wooden doors. Clara took a deep breath and pushed the doors open with a creak that echoed through the silent forest. They stepped inside, and the doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the decaying darkness. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly drapes, and every step they took stirred up centuries-old dirt. The light from their flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the cracked walls adorned with faded portraits of long-dead inhabitants. Clara led the way, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're just here to look around," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Nothing can hurt us." They explored the ground floor, finding rooms filled with broken furniture, tattered curtains, and remnants of a life long gone. But it was the staircase leading to the second floor that seemed to beckon them with an almost tangible force. Reluctantly, they began their ascent. As they reached the top, a faint, distant cry echoed through the corridor. It sounded like a child's wail, sending chills down their spines. They followed the sound to a door at the end of the hallway. Sam tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Let's go back," Lily pleaded, her voice trembling. "No," Clara insisted. "We've come this far." With a grunt, Sam kicked the door open. The room beyond was even more decrepit than the others. In the far corner stood a small crib, untouched by time, unlike the rest of the manor. They approached it cautiously, their flashlights illuminating a thick layer of dust that covered everything except the crib. Inside the crib lay a small black and white photograph of a crying baby. The image was so vivid, so real, it felt as though the baby's wails were emanating from the picture itself. The baby's eyes seemed to follow them, pleading for help. A sudden, loud thump made them all jump. They turned to see the door they had entered through slam shut. Panic set in as the sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs. They huddled together, eyes fixed on the doorway. A cold, skeletal hand gripped Clara's shoulder, and she spun around to find a faceless figure standing inches away. The figure had a single, hollow eye and a mouth stretched into a grotesque, toothless grin. Its flesh was pale and sagging, and it emitted a putrid stench of decay. Clara screamed, and they all bolted for the door, but the figure grabbed Clara, holding her back. Its grip was cold and unyielding. Desperate, she bit into its arm, tearing away a chunk of rancid flesh. She gagged but managed to break free, sprinting towards the door with Sam and Lily. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, another figure appeared, blocking their path. This one had no eyes, only gaping holes, and its face was a mass of scars and dried blood. It reached out, its long fingers closing around Clara's wrist. Summoning her last bit of courage, Clara twisted free and pushed past the figure, feeling its cold, clammy skin against her own. The trio burst through the front doors and into the night, not stopping until they were safely back in the village. The next day, they returned to Ashwood Manor in the safety of daylight, determined to find evidence of their harrowing experience. But the manor appeared untouched, as though no one had been there for years. There were no footprints, no signs of the flesh Clara had torn away, and the photograph was gone. The villagers' warnings echoed in their minds. Some places are better left undisturbed, and some secrets are meant to remain hidden. The shadows of Ashwood Manor had claimed yet another piece of their innocence, and the memory of that night would haunt them forever. I used to be a freelance wildlife photographer, spending countless nights in the wilderness to capture stunning images of animals. My primary source of income was selling these photos to nature magazines. I would often set up my tent in the mountains, waiting patiently for animals to pass by, sometimes using infrared sensors to automatically detect and photograph their movements. Because of my work, I was frequently alone in remote areas, and the solitude of the mountains never scared me until that terrifying night. One summer, I ventured into the remote swamps of the Appalachian Mountains. After a morning hike, I reached my destination around p.m. I set up my single-person tent by the riverbank and took a nap, as I usually did, to rest up for the night's photography session. The mountains were always desolate, and I felt safer there than in any city. As darkness fell, I woke up and lit my lantern inside the tent. I checked my equipment and put on my headlamp, ready to capture the perfect shot. Stepping out of my tent, I noticed something unusual. About 30 feet upstream, there was another tent. It was blue. I was surprised since I always chose isolated spots where no one else would be. In the middle of the day, there was definitely no one around when I set up camp. Had someone arrived silently while I was asleep? The blue tent had no light emanating from it, and I couldn't see anyone inside. It was eerily silent. I considered going over to greet the occupant, but the tent's presence gave me an uneasy feeling. Trusting my instincts, I decided to move to a new location, far from the mysterious tent. I packed my gear quickly and hiked a few more miles upstream. By the time I found a new spot, it was nearly p.m. Exhausted, I set up my tent again and quickly fell asleep after a simple meal. Around m, I awoke drenched in sweat, despite the chilly mountain air. The atmosphere inside the tent felt suffocating. I unzipped the tent for fresh air, and to my horror, the blue tent was now right beside mine, almost touching. Panic set in as the blue tent's light turned on, casting eerie shadows. Two dark hands emerged from the tent, reaching toward me. I bolted out of my tent, stumbling through the darkness. I didn't stop running until I reached a small clearing by the river. With no other option, I crouched there, shivering, until dawn. When the first light of day broke, I went back to the village at the foot of the mountain and gathered some locals to help investigate. We found my tent and the blue tent side by side. The blue tent was now old and tattered, and inside, there was a skeleton. It had been there for over a decade. That horrifying experience made me quit my freelance work and never return to the mountains. I needed to find a new job, but my life was more important than any photograph.